Welcome to the short PowerPoint video on the magic of metaphors. The use of metaphors is essential when you're trying to sell, persuade, or explain anything to anyone. My name is Gary Tomlinson, and I'll be your narrator for this session. The education today comes directly from Ann Miller's book, Metaphorically Selling. It's a book I highly recommend, especially for those of us that are in sales, marketing, and/or advertising. It's easy to confuse information with communication today. People, especially those in sales, tend to make two key mistakes. The first one is that rather than choose their words carefully, they inundate their listener with everything they know, often speaking more from their point of view rather than from their clients. What happens is they put their buyers to sleep. The bet these salespeople make is that something will stick. But in fact, just the opposite happens. Listeners double the resistance to the message. They cut short the salesperson who is not concise. They tune out the presenter who shovels on the details. The window of opportunity in terms of getting people's attention, opening up their minds, and teaching them something they didn't already know, that's never been great. And given the dire strait of communication today, it's narrowing all the time. Which brings us to the second mistake. Too much other information competes for their listeners' attention. Listeners already drowning in a tidal wave of information simply can't respond to another similar sounding bucketful thrown in their faces. We live in an information age. Presumably, that means each of us can arm ourselves with whatever information we need, when we need it, to make a sound decision or judgment. But in fact, we are so awash in info bites that instead of feeling we're better able to discern differences and make decisions, we're actually drowning in choices. We shut out more stimuli in self-defense. Saying more or speaking loudly won't get you heard amidst this terrific static. In fact, to get through to your client, you don't want your words heard so much as you want them seen. Our goal is to turn our listeners' eyes into ears. Imagery, the core of metaphoric language, will surprise, grab, inform, and persuade your listeners as mere explanation will not. Vivid language will distinguish you from the swarm, will make you heard above the drone, will make you that rare person, a communicator that gets results. And in our world of information overload, that gives you a tremendous competitive advantage. For example, when Steve Jobs was courting a wavering John Sculley from Pepsi to become CEO of Apple, his winning argument was not a list of facts and benefits. It was the choice of images he famously painted in Sculley's mind when he asked this question. Do you want to spend the rest of your life selling sugared water, or do you want a chance to change the world? Now that's a compelling question. What are metaphors? A metaphor is simply a way of communicating. It's a shortcut to instant understanding. Think of it as a mental equation in which something is compared to something else. Metaphors make complex and unfamiliar things or ideas simple and familiar to the listener because they compare the unknown to what the listener already knows and accepts. Metaphors are visual in nature and literally help your client or audience see in a flash, in a vivid emotional way, what you mean. If you were to create an equation for the power of metaphors, it would be this. Information plus metaphor equals I see what you mean. Here's a 4-step model to use for creating winning metaphors. The first step is determine the client's blind spot. The first step in overcoming client resistance, his blind spot, is to identify what lies behind it. What you may hear a client tell you is one thing. What you must understand to be his true blind spot is quite another. Here are a few examples of blind spots masquerading as objections. The objection is you're too expensive, but the likely blind spot is they're confusing value with price. The objection, we've always done it this way. The likely blind spot is they have a fear of change. An objection, well, we'll just start with a test. The likely blind spot could be a fear of large commitment. The objection, yes, but not now. The likely blind spot is we have no sense of urgency. Remember, the first step in overcoming client resistance is to identify what lies behind it. What are their blind spots? The second step is snapshot client. The number one rule in selling is to put your client in the center of any communication. What you know about your client is as important, if not more so, than what it is you want to say. The same principle holds true in the creation of a winning metaphor. For it to work, it must draw on images and emotions from your client's world. It's critical that you take a snapshot of your clients before groping for the right metaphor to sway them. The question to ask yourself, what visual images and reference points are in your client's mental album that you can seize on? Now, you can snapshot your prospects by drawing on their personal background. For example, are they male or female? Are they a Generation X or a Boomer, a mature, a millennial? Are they married or single? Do they have hobbies and passions? In their industry or business, what's their position? What's their industry? What have their achievements been? Are they an industry leader or are they a startup? Also, some of the common knowledges. What about the events in the news today that might be affecting your client? What are the current events? Maybe sports, economy, the world. Cultural news, entertainment, television, movies. And then general life experience, things such as the weather, rush hour traffic, computer problems, vacation experiences. Remember, what you know about your client is as important, if not more so, than what it is you want to say. This third step is to create comparison. Create a metaphor based on a detail from your snapshot that will change the lens through which your client is seeing your pitch. Ask yourself, what is this like in my client's life? And then ask, what else? What else? And still, what else? Remember, the number one rule in selling is to put your client in the center of any communication. And the fourth step is relate back to the situation. Relating your metaphor or analogy to the topic at hand drives home your point and spares your listener any confusion which might derail the deal. To be successful in removing a client's blind spot, you need to determine the nature of the resistance, take a snapshot of the client, create a metaphor based on that snapshot, and then relate that metaphor or analogy back to the client. Outstanding salespeople and communicators use carefully thought out, hard-hitting imagery to achieve emotional, visceral, gut understanding. Ann Miller calls this imagery METAPHORIA, which is the visual language of persuasion. You use METAPHORIA to position your products and services versus the competition, to neutralize objections, resistance, fears, skepticism, and negativity, and to help buyers get your story. In summary, when it comes to explanations, quality of expression beats quantity of words. Comparisons to the known and loved make the unknown familiar and desirable. Simple analogy can make the highly technical easy to grasp, and the obvious can be made memorable. Subtle distinctions can be made obvious. Thanks for taking your time to watch this video on the magic of metaphors. The education came directly from Ann Miller's book, Metaphorically Selling. For more information or to buy a copy of Metaphorically Selling, go to www.annmiller.com. If you like this educational format, be sure to check out my other videos at www.gary-tomlinson.com. I'll be adding new ones on a regular basis, so make sure you come back often, and feel free to share this education with others. Now I'll leave you with this quote by Mark Twain. The difference between the right word and the almost right word is the difference between lightning and a lightning bug.